All right, we're going to be in chapter 52 of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 52. As we come into this chapter, we're starting to get more and more of the visual imagery of the Messiah, of Jesus himself. Most of Isaiah, especially this section, has been one of comfort, one of trying to show their restoration, and the idea that there is this servant. Like I said, there's always kind of, Isaiah, God's wisdom is trying to give two pictures, like double vision almost, which would drive us crazy if you ever crossed your eyes or had double vision. There's two different images competing. And in the way that this is unfolded and through Isaiah is that the terms and the visuals have two applications. And most of it is directly applicable as they read this to their situation that they were going to be facing. Now remember, they're not in Babylon yet. This is something that's not going to happen for maybe close to 50 to 70 years in the future. Now think about it. Do you plan that far? What does 50 years from now mean to you? Well, I don't know about how old you are, but it doesn't mean a thing to me. 50 years for me, and that's 120, 110. I'm not going to be around. So if somebody was sitting there preaching to me about the history of something, 60, 70 years in the future, probably wouldn't hit close to home to me. Maybe if I knew it had to deal with my grandchildren and things like this. Now, once you're sitting in Babylon, and it's already happened, you might open up the book of Isaiah and look at it a little differently. And this is kind of what it was meant to do. First, those who initially read this letter were going to get a picture of what was going to be happening. Predictions of historical things that there's no way that any other person, human, could reveal it and then have it happen in such a distant time. And one of the main ones is this idea of a servant. We know that people who are of God, his people, were servants. So you could say Abraham was his servant. You can say Jacob, the patriarchs, they were his servant. He calls Israel as a nation his servant. But then we saw this unique servant, this one that the servant was going to save the servant. And that's where, again, something 50 years in the future, you'd go, okay, I just don't get it. I didn't understand that preacher, what he said. Let's just move on. But eventually, you're going to start to see, whoa, wait a minute. He's talking about, there's another servant that's going to save the servant. That servant, we know he had been talking about, was Israel itself. So who's this other one? And slowly, he's bringing this out. One of the other things that Isaiah has revealed to them is that he says, I'm going to tell you something new. And this is what I was talking about, where they never received the full picture of everything. They never had total clarity about how this king that had been promised coming would restore this kingdom. That's all they kind of knew. But they didn't know about the suffering Savior. They didn't understand that part of it. This is where you start to see this, and it would be even more confusing. So as we read it, think about it in those type of views. One, if you were one that was just receiving this, and it was something not to happen until the future, and then one who's sitting in Babylon going, all that stuff 50 years ago that he talked about has happened. And then after the exile, you're reading it again, and you're going, there's a servant in here. Where's he at? Where is this? There's so many other clues that are being dropped that you would say, okay, all that Babylonian stuff's behind us now. But they were just enough to start to describe the real Messiah when he comes. That's what's kind of exciting as we come into this. To us, again, poetry, some of the use of the languages is a little bit out of our wheelhouse. We don't understand it. We don't really grasp it. We don't talk like that. So it does make that. So 51 and 52 kind of flow together and especially the end of 52, he's bringing them out. He's showing how he's going to bring them out of captivity, and that those who are oppressing him are going to be oppressed, that they're going to suffer. So Babylon is going to end up being humiliated, and that they're going to be brought back and restored. So as he roadmaps this out, he calls, and you'll hear that phrase. He's already brought this up about awake, 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 awake. We brought that up last time. Pay attention, listen, be attentive, and rise from the dust. So we're going to talk about that. Then the next, he talks about the Lord's promised redemption that cannot be purchased with money. Now, I want you to hold on to that too, because remember what I said, they're shadows of pointing to the Messiah. What cannot be purchased with money? So you're probably already ahead of me on that, and that's what's beautiful about this, because it is applicable to them too. Most nations, whenever they're subjugated and they're brought out into captivity, they don't just get turned loose free. No. But this idea of who owns you is what he's really going to talk about. And the idea that there is nothing, and it's a relationship as well when it comes to that, he's going to talk about. Then he's going to move to about the good news. Announcement of this good news, this peace, salvation, and the reign of God, this new period, which has a shadow again of not only after they come out of captivity, but something bigger, the real thing that God is shooting for. And the redeemed people must come out and depart in holiness under God's protection. They need to understand that. That's a concept that they're going to see. And then he's going to bring out this servant that we've been talking about. This servant's going to be exalted, yet first, he's going to be messed up. There's something terrible that's going to happen to him. I said it that way because, again, if you're one who was just hearing this message for the first time, he wrote it. It's not what you want of somebody who's going to help you. What is wrong with this and how he's going to be rejected. So the key to this, I think, is your God reigns. You may be in captivity, doesn't matter what situation you are in, your God reigns, and he hasn't forgot you. But the first thing he brings up is Zion must wake up. Now, this is a spiritual Zion, but, because every time, if you're sitting in Babylon, all you can remember is probably as you are being drug away, the smoke and the flames of the burning city and the dust that's left over. It's like it's all destroyed. So this is that renewal of Zion. Zion is what? It's God's dwelling place. That is the ultimate figurative speech that he's applying, that it's where God lives. And so he starts out in verse 1. Awake, awake, put on your strength, O Zion. Put on your beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. For there shall no more come into you the circumcised and the unclean. Shake off the dust from the dust and arise. Be seated, O Jerusalem. Loosen the bonds from your necks, O captive daughter of Zion. See how he weaves that back and forth. He's using it as we kind of look at what he's saying, using this word, O Zion. You see, going from like disheveled because of being in a low status and everything, and trying to show that dust off. Well, what happened when they were beaten down and they were taken off? They were filled with the dirt and all this, and so he's bringing them back and restoring them. He's trying to show them that Zion, it shouldn't despair, but rise up because the Lord is acted. Now, again, if you're sitting there looking at it 50 years into the future, you're probably just going, If you're sitting in Babylon and you read it again, you'd be going, whoa, the Lord has acted. Now, they were in a short period of time, 70 years. He told them that too. He told them the exact amount of time that they were going to happen. And he wants to see that strength and beauty restored as being gifts. Coming back and being restored. But it's not self-made glory. It's not going. They're not going to be the ones that's going to do it. This is something bigger, outside of their control. The whole problem with us people is that too often when we build something and we do something, we stand back and pat ourselves on the shoulder and go, "Look what I did! Look at that temple! Good job! Wow! Whew! Yeah, that was good, man. That was a great carpentry work you did over there. And that's physically, but also spiritually. All of this is not going to be self-made glory. The holy city must look like the Lord's redeemed people. That's what he's also bringing out, this idea that the Lord's redeemed, those he's going to save and bring out of bondage. What does this do with the gospel? Same thing. He's going to redeem them, and he's going to bring them out. And so this holy city, we know that the Hebrew writer says what? He says, we come to a heavenly Jerusalem. There, that is very clear of what he is pointing to here, and showing that as Christians, our citizenship is now in the heavenly Jerusalem, on the heavenly Mount Zion, not the physical location. And so God's comfort does not leave his people in dust and chains. A lot of times we feel that way, in life, what life does to you. And if you're sitting in Babylon, you've been in bondage a lot. I was reading a psalm just a while ago, before I went up and read the psalm I chose. And it's a psalm was written when they were in captivity. And it says that, sing a song. And our captives, the Babylonians, want us to sing a song. How can I sing a song? Here I am by the river, and if I ever forget Jerusalem, you could just see in that psalm, their hearts was so focused. Don't ever let me forget about Jerusalem and the importance of it. But God was not going to leave them in that condition. And the next part, he comes into this idea of this relationship and who owns who. What is the value? He's using something kind of physical in the sense of money, but he's not talking about money directly. He says in verse 3, for thus says the Lord, you were sold for nothing, and you shall be redeemed without money. For thus says the Lord God, my people went down at the first into Egypt and sojourned there, and the Assyrian oppressed them for nothing. Now, therefore, what I have here, declares the Lord, seeing that my people are taken away for nothing. Their rulers wail, declares the Lord, and continually all the day my name is despised. Therefore my people shall know my name. Therefore in that day they shall know that it is I who speak. Here I am. So redeemed, the Lord sees that oppression of what they're going to be going through during that time. He also hears the dishonor. They were a very proud people, and they had a lot of reasons to have pride in Yahweh. Yahweh was the only one true God. They've been talking about that. They have history of where the one true God had done these great things for them. And then the Babylonians come in and just smash them and bring them down. And it's almost, you could see people looking at the Jews going, where's your God? Oh, you had the one God, didn't you? Where's he at now? And who's on top of who? Who's ruling who now? And so there was a lot of blasphemy. We see that at the very end where Belshazzar brings in the articles of the temple, right? And he defiles them and bringing them into this like food orgy. And that's the end of it. And that's when the handwriting on the wall comes up. God says, times you've been judged, you've been found waiting, and that's the end is tonight. And so that was the accumulation of it, but it fits with what he's talking about in the way that they were defiling and blaspheming against God himself. So yeah, he disciplined his children, but the way that they were treated, God never forgot. Even the Edomites, remember when they were being taken off by the Babylonians, they not only helped, they set up checkpoints to catch the Jews as they were trying to get away, and took them back and turned them over to the Babylonians. And then went in and took everything out of their houses. And their family, bloodline, Edom, remember Esau? He said, I haven't forgot that either. Just because God wants to bring about justice through these types of events of punishment, doesn't justify or does he accept the manner in which the people do it. That's kind of what we have. It's kind of like, well, wait a minute. I mean, you called the Babylonians on them. What did you expect? right? They're dirty people. They're rotten. But he says, yeah, but there's a certain level they cross the line. And that's what he's kind of expressing. So he sees their oppression when they're down and they're out. And he says that, when you look at your history, there's no empire that has ever been able to really withstand them. And that's why he brings up the historical points. He brings up Egypt. They sojourned there, which meant they didn't live there. They went there. But they went there, and at first, remember the history, when they got there, man, things were great, weren't they? I mean, Joseph was second to Pharaoh. I mean, they gave him the choice land, and things were going great. And then all of a sudden, what happened? Pharaoh comes along that doesn't know who they are. They become threatened by them, and they start to oppress them. And then we know the rest of the story with Egypt. But it's not put in there by accident, what Isaiah is saying. The Assyrians, the same thing. When the Assyrians came in, they took off the whole northern tribe, all the tribes, and took them off into captivity. They also, if you remember, in Isaiah, he brings up and he describes a historical point when Sennacherib comes in and he surrounds Jerusalem and he starts to threaten them and he defiles God by saying he's there to kill their God too. He's killed all the gods and I'm going to kill your God too. And that night, then the Lord wiped out 185,000 of them. So you can see where, okay, but he saved them. But so they have that historical point that where Judah, you are spared as well. You have those things. And they can't cancel that covenant. They're not going to be able to break it, even though it may feel like it as you sit there in Babylon in chains and everything that's going on. The covenant is still there. And that's sometimes when we're getting punished or we're going through horrible things in our lives, how's your covenant with Christ? Sometimes we feel like, well, maybe I did something and it's broke. That God has given up on me. No, not at all. You are in a covenant relationship. He wants to save you. He sees what you're going through. But we have a role in it. And we also may have to endure certain things. We know that there are trials and tribulations that will come upon us. But it does not change the covenant. And that's what he's trying to bring through to them here. But the redemption is grounded in the Lord's character. Not in Israel's ability to pay. They can't pay for themselves out of that. And that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, how could you get yourself out of captivity? And he's trying to show to them, those who are reading this, that's going to happen in the future, what you're going to see is they're going to get set free. And and it's going to be Cyrus, right? And Cyrus is going to give them money. He's going to give them all the articles of worship back. I mean, that's unprecedented. It never happens like that. But it's not because of their capability of what's going to happen. The goal is that God's people know his name. That's the point he's trying to bring across, and trust his word. In the hardest times of your life, when you're going through the most difficult times, that's something we need to remember is know God's name. Remember it. Don't let it be covered up with the things that are impacting you during your daily life. And trust his word. Trust his word. So now he moves even closer to a more beautiful picture about the good news on the mountains. And this is where we see the gospel being quoted from this in the New Testament. So you'll probably recognize it in verse 7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. So the heart of the announcement that he says that this message is going to come is, the good news is God has acted for his people. The good news in the gospel is God has acted for us. He has taken and brought peace. He broke that condition of Zion, is answered by the Lord's reign, by the Jesus Christ as well. That's that dual kind of picture here. And salvation isn't just by escape. We're still living in the same world. We're still living in the same conditions, and that's going to be the thing. But the restoration comes under God. The center point is this idea that your God reigns. When you start to think that somehow God's forgotten you, well, then you feel you forgot about his reigning. If you feel like there's some reason that nature or some other things are greater or have accomplished something, no, you forgot your God reigns. Your God rules everything, always, forever and ever. He goes on in verse 8. The voice of your watchmen, they lift up their voice. Together they sing for joy. For eye to eye they see the return of the Lord to Zion. Break forth together into the singing, you wastelands of Jerusalem, for the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of God. So let's back up and bring up to the beginning of this. The voice of your watchman. What's a watchman? A watchman was somebody who stood on the walls and looked for threats. And they would shout out, the enemy's coming, the enemy's coming, get on alert. What's interesting about this picture is instead of announcing the threat, they're going to lift up their voice and sing for joy. Look, the Lord is coming, the Lord is coming. Look what's going on. And they see that is, the return of the Lord to Zion. Where's this with Jesus? When he came to Jerusalem, when he comes to Zion, the good news that's being preached. And so he sees all the places of Jerusalem that have been wasted away with the sinfulness of all the destruction. The Lord is going to comfort them. Why? Because he redeemed them. Redemption. Well, as a Christian, redeeming means something very special to us. The redemption for them was as well bringing them back and restoring them. The Lord has bared his holy arm. Did you get him? Oh, anyway, I know I won't talk about it. But when he talks about bearing his arm, I saw it too. Bearing his holy arm, he means like rolling up your arm, your sleeve. What do? When you're getting ready to go to work, you roll up your arm. So that's what I love about this. The Lord has bared his holy arms before all the nations. He's like, okay, let's do this. And the Lord's like, all right, he's ready for action. And not only just Jerusalem, but all the nations to the ends of the earth. They're going to see the salvation of God. Now, whether they accept it or not is another thing, but that's something that the gospel is going to. So the gospel, we see the watchmen singing because the presence is returning to his people. And that was the restoration with Ezra and Nehemiah when they came back and they built the temple. They saw that as well. Jerusalem, even though they're sitting in ruins and smoldering, he says, no, they're commanded to rejoice because the rebuilding is going to happen. It's going to be complete. And the Lord, his salvation is going to be seen by all around. And he promises that comfort. And it's also in Isaiah chapter 40, and now it's being announced in chapter 52, so this whole section here as well. Depart in holiness. So when they leave Babylon, what is holiness again? Holiness is set apart. It's something that God has designated, what God calls. So his people, from the time that they start walking back, they're going to be departing, he says, in holiness. He says, depart, depart, go out from there. Touch no unclean thing, go out from the midst of her. Purify yourselves, you who bear the vessels of the Lord. By the way, the vessels of the Lord were the things that were going to be from the articles of the temple that the Babylonians had taken with them when they took them in captivity. And that Cyrus was going to say, give them back to them, because they need them when they build the temple. So when they go back and worship Yahweh, they need those articles and those, the showbread and all the candles, all the articles that they took out of there. And so it's interesting how he says, you who bear the vessels of the Lord. For you shall not go out in haste, and you shall not go in flight. For the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. What does that sound like? You shall not go out in haste. Now that's different, because when they left Egypt, they went out in haste, didn't they? But this time, no. They're not going to be a mad mob trying to get out of Babylon, You're not going to be in flight. That's stressful. That is so unnerving. If you ever had to evacuate, I don't know if has anyone ever had to evacuate because of a hurricane or something like that? I haven't, but I can imagine. I've seen the news films of people trying to throw everything they can into their car and try to get out of and evacuate out of an area. And that's just total chaos, isn't it? That's no. He goes, no, you're not going to leave like that. It's going to be peaceful and God is not only going to be in front of you, but he is going to be your rear guard. Now, that also reminds me of when they were in Egypt, when they came out. Those that were in the rear of the caravan as they were coming out, the Amalekites attacked them and killed a bunch of them. That was one of the curses God put on. Remember, Saul failed to follow through with. And so I found this interesting that, no, you're not going to have to worry about that. You're not going to have to worry about those in the back. I'm taking care of them. I'm your rear guard, and I'm also going to guide you. And so this grace calls them not back into uncleanness. He's really trying to remind them. He's not being racially either when he says, don't touch anything unclean, and nothing unclean will come into Jerusalem. It's about the idea of their spiritual relationship being pure and undefiled. The return here is pictured as like a holy procession as they're going back to Jerusalem. Many righteous Jews, as they would go to the temple, they took it as something very sacred. And as they would approach the temple, you remember all the pools of washing as they would go up the steps and clean themselves and prepare themselves. And so it's almost like this beautiful, organized, holy procession that's going to come out of captivity back and restore, not this panicked escape. And his presence is going to guard them all the way. The redeemed people, though, must carry the worship of God with clean hands. And that kind of reminds me of, the way the articles that were to be carried, how they were packaged during when the tabernacle was built with Moses. Very specific, wasn't it, on who exactly could do it, how they were to pack it, who carried the ark, all the things about it. And so there's this idea of the seriousness of worship that's going to be there. Now he moves to behold my servant. So Zion's reestablished, and now he talks about his servant. He says, behold, my servant shall act wisely. He shall be high and lifted up, and shall be exalted. If you've been a Christian a minute or more, this already starts to make you see things, but a little confusing, right? Shall be exalted. There's mixed metaphors in this, and yet it's almost like Peter trying to understand, how can we have a glorious Savior that's going to suffer? How do those don't seem to go together? Most conquerors, they don't suffer and get torn up and killed. They ride on into victory, right? And start to rule. And so this is the beginning of kind of showing this picture here. So the servant's exaltation. One, he says he's going to act wisely. Look at the wisdom that he had, that every time when Jesus came before people, anybody he came into, he just, the Pharisees, the legalists, everybody would just be like, how does this guy do this? What? Isn't this guy the carpenter? I mean, how could he be so smart and wise? And so he's going to therefore succeed in this. He's high, he's lifted up, and he's exalted, but that exaltation is not separated from his humiliation. And that's something that, like I said, the apostles struggled with. Remember Peter when he told him, I have to go to Jerusalem and be turned over to evil men, and they're going to torture me and kill me. And he goes, no, you're not. You know what? Even Isaiah knew that I had to, because that's what he talked about right here. So he prepares them to see glory through suffering, the very thing that I thought was kind of ironic, that here Isaiah has talked about this as well, that this is what has to happen. In 14, as many were astonished at you, his appearance was so marred beyond human semblance, and yet his form beyond that of children of mankind. So shall he sprinkle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. For that which has not been told them they see, and that which they have not heard they understand. They're going to finally get it, right? The nations, the peoples. Now, a lot of times, and I struggled with it forever, and it always baffled me because we know how the nations reacted nationally, but many times these blessings were not just to nations, because there's going to be a change of nations even from the time of Babylon. Babylon's going to fall, Assyria's going to rise, Assyria's going to fall, Greece is going to rise. They're all going to rise and fall. And even to this day, we see nations changing. What he's talking is all nationalities as well. All the people from Greece, all the people from Africa, all the people from these areas, identifying them as the nation states in a sense, the worldwide. But his work is cleansing. That's interesting. He didn't say ruling, cleansing. From what? From sin. That's what he was going to do. And this is another part where it kind of baffles me that if they knew Isaiah so well, why did they have such a hard time understanding that the gospel message was also meant for the Gentiles? All nations were represented on the day of Pentecost, remember? And then from there, it went forward to all nations as well. And so the nations are not going to be spectators only. Many of the nations are going to be affected by it. Kings who usually give commands, they're going to be silenced. You almost see that a little bit with Pilate. Because Pilate reached a point where he just couldn't grasp what was going on. You could tell that his interaction with Jesus, as you read it, and even historically you read about the way he responded, it was cowardly, but at the same time, you remember his wife even had a dream and told her to go ahead and have nothing to do with this man at all. So the unseen truth and the unheard truth is finally going to be understood. And that's going to be the clarity that the gospel is going to have. So these are some of the New Testament connections. We see in Romans 10:15, Paul uses Isaiah 52:7 to describe the preaching of the good news and what good news it is. And then also Paul uses it again in chapter 15:21 about the mission that Christ had not been named specifically. The suffering servant is a picture that he's drawing here in Isaiah, is going to be the same as well. So when we look at the summary of this, the rise, God doesn't leave his redeemed people in the dust and chains. God is not going to leave us as well in dust and chains. Trust, redemption rests on the Lord's word and name alone. That's it. The proclamation that is still going out to this day is the message is peace and salvation, and that our God is still reigning through Christ himself. Redemption calls for holiness. We want to be redeemed. It's through holiness and separation, and the unclean things have to be put out of our lives. And so that, in a quick nutshell, is Isaiah 52. So if there's somebody here tonight that needs any assistance or something we can do to help you at this time and you're comfortable, let us know while we stand and sing.